your resume, James, I'm sure I missed some stuff, but this is in order of what I could find. So moving backwards from most recent, we have Taylor Swift, Gracie Abrams, John Legend, which I didn't even know about, but that seems to be on the internet. The National, of course. Ed Sheeran, the album Leaf, Big Red Machine, for those that don't know, is the Bon Iver, the National side project thing. Sufjan, of course, which I think a lot of people know you from. Graham Colton, Andrew Bell, Avril Lavigne, which I don't think I also knew about.
Whoa.
Rosie Thomas, Dave Bazan / Pedro the Lion, Chase Pagan, The Welcome Wagon, Jeremy Enoch, Aqueduct. You were a member of Esther Drang. You make your own stuff under your name. You also are a member of Planetarium, which I think is the album and the band name. And then most recently, you did some stuff for the Twisters soundtrack, which I went and saw in the theater.
Sick.
And didn't know that you were in the movie too.
Dude,
there was a cut, and my wife and I were like, "Oh, that's Dave.
That's so funny." Oh my gosh. I loved that I just didn't really tell anyone about that, just to get that reaction from my friends, like,
that's so
wait a
sick.
second.
Did you know you were going to be in it?
Yeah, it started out as, hey, we're gonna do we need a band for this moment in the movie, because I'm pals with the guy that directed the movie, and he just reached out. Super chill, awesome dude, and he was like, hey, I'm doing this movie. It's set in Oklahoma.
Did they film it in Oklahoma?
They did, yeah.
Oh,
so were you like, you could have been like a local guide on there a little bit too?
Well, that's what I think. That was actually, he wanted it to be like Oklahoma, at least.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like people
like
from
authentic.
Oklahoma actually. Yeah. Just he was thinking about the details. So he
cool.
kind of recruited me to find the other two singers, and who are also Oklahoma artists.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And then they ended up putting the song on the soundtrack, which was cool. But initially, it was just supposed to be a moment in the film.
In the song.
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it was cool. It was amazing. It was so fun.
Dang.
Did he when he was explaining did he say Twister? Like, were you like, wait, are you talking about Twister or?
Yeah, he was like, hey, I'm doing this movie. It's set in Oklahoma, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And he took a while for the Twister part to come. He was like, it's just going to be an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Like, I know you have a bunch of friends from Oklahoma. I grew up there and spent 24 years in Oklahoma, by the way. So that's where and he was like, oh, by the way, it's a sequel to that movie Twister. And I was like, wait, Twister? Like Twister?
90s?
He was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, yeah, haha.
What I want to know is how far in the description did he get till he actually explained there was a Twister in it, and then
it's about bad weather.
It wasn't. Yeah. And even at the shoot, because it was like I just said, yeah, dude, I'm down, let's do it. And a month later, I'm sitting there in the shoot. It's a massive production. Like,
oh, sure.
Huge, yeah.
The biggest camera I've ever seen. It looks like an actual crane, with like, and the guy with the light meter, whatever. Or no, the dude with the like
the
thing,
slate, I think it's
called.
called.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm an industry professional.
Yeah.
That he's like right in front of my nose going, and the camera starts like basically zoom. It's like an inch from my hand,
Yeah.
And Isaac walked over and was like, hey, he was just kind of laughing like, this is pretty crazy, right? And I was like, yeah, like, how come you didn't tell me it was going to be this? I was going to be like, film? I knew it. I thought we might be, oh, you're off in the background or what, you know how movies are. There's always like a random band.
For sure.
They're not even playing their instruments. They've never held a guitar before.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
which always drives me crazy.
Like, it's the worst. It's the worst.
Some drummers like,
yeah, I know it's actually with drums, it is the actual worst. Cause you can't, that's
fake it.
Why?
Yeah, somebody hits like a cymbal, and the cymbal is like there's no crash.
Crazy. I'm always impressed when they do it right. Actually, I'm like, oh, you can tell he knows what he's doing. Anyway,
every drummer, there's like 10 drummers that care about that, and it's 5 of us are right here. Yeah.
Was there ever a moment when you were doing that? How did you do? Was that scene like one and done, or what? Did he come over and be like, "Listen, really like your, the vibe, but we're gonna need you to
get into it a little bit more"?
Yeah,
we sang it. We sang it and played it like 100 times because the thing is they were shooting the dialogue as well at the same. It was all one big shot, so it was like they can't
so it's not, that song's not overdubbed. You were like actually recording it, right?
That's a live take from the
way.
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's actually really cool. I love shit like that. I think that's so cool because you could easily not do that, and I don't think, but I think it's going to be a lot cooler because I think it feels like real, and especially watching it, you can kind of pick up on that, instead of just dubbed.
I would feel so much pressure if I was in that situation.
Well, especially for me, because I was playing guitar and singing, which is not really what I do.
That's what I was like. What happens when Glenn Powell's like gets all the emotion in the take, and he's like, "It's a perfect take," but you were like, "Actually, guys, my voice cracked. We got to do it again."
I dropped my pick. I'm sorry. Can we go back, Glenn? I know.
It shows you in the background. You're shaking the acoustic guitar trying to get the pick out. Just come on.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. That's so funny. Oh man. No, it was good. Luckily Max and Ken are the other two singers, and they're amazing. And so I was just we were leaning on them for sure. So, but it was, all of us.
Wildorado, is that their?
Max is from Wildorado, and Ken Pomeroy is her name. She's a solo artist, songwriter. Amazing. Yeah, you're going to probably see a lot more of her.
Awesome.
She's great.
Wait, what else is, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I just wanted to know, what instrument did you actually learn first? Because you play obviously more than just drums.
Yeah, no, drums are my thing for sure. Like that was the first instrument. And, I started that at like 12 officially, I think, but I had a snare drum. I think 7 or 8, I got a snare and some sticks just to kind of like get the fire started, but then, so yeah, I didn't really, as far as other instruments go, that just kind of came up. I think being in bands and there was stuff around, like we had a piano in the house always growing up. So I would sort of poke around on that. But
what led you to getting a drum? Was it your parents or just on your own account?
I don't really know. I think I remember asking my dad a really funny question, which was I was around that age, and I remember being like, "Hey Dad, what's easier, drums or bass?" Which was just a funny question to ask him.
It's a great question.
And he's like, "Bass for sure."
Yeah, he was like,
"Bass is 4 strings, son."
I know. I did, and I think he had a really nice answer of just being like, that's not really how you should look at it. I think he was, because he was a musician, a piano player, and a singer, and so he was like, well, you shouldn't think about it that way. You should think about whatever you feel drawn to, So somehow we landed on drums, and they were cool with it.
Yeah, it's always impressive when parents are cool with drums. I've always
God bless. Well,
him.
and my dad had an ulterior motive, because I ended up playing drums in he had a Southern gospel quartet that was like semi-professional, and he just put me to work in the band. I started playing in the band about 13 and a half. Yeah, I know.
Whoa, that's awesome.
He's like, you're like, should I play bass or drums? He's like, we need a drummer. So
no, I really, honestly, I think that's like 80% probably true.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's what my brother did.
Really?
Yeah, he was just like, I need a drummer. He played guitar, and he's like, you should probably play drums. He's like, needed someone to play with. I was like, all right, it's fine.
It's kind of a good reason to learn. I don't know. It's just weird how things like that can shape your life in a weird way.
It's so true.
Yeah,
it's so true. Did you as far as like you said, you played with his band first, and it was kind of that what do you say is like gospel kind of stuff?
Yeah, the gospel quartet music, whatever. I'm
which
sure
is pretty chop heavy, right? I mean, I feel like it's like
the good
now
stuff
it is. I don't think it was like that.
Okay.
That was his scene was more like country gospel, where it was just a lot of like shuffle, brush, duka chaka, that kind of stuff.
That's
cool though.
Yeah, I did a lot. It's called the country shuffle, or that's at least what we called it.
Nice.
And it was a kind of an amazing education, because it was always in churches. I mean, we played like fairs and amusement parks and stuff occasionally, but a lot of times it was in a church, and acoustically crazy spaces, right? Super loud.
Huge. Yeah.
So it was like, how quiet can you play? We don't even want to hear it.
So you got to do a shuffle fast, but really quiet.
Yes.
That's
quiet.
Yeah.
It's gonna really train you well, obviously.
It's funny how I go back. Yeah. I go back to that as being like this kind of like central, almost defining thing in my drumming, which is like, wow, it was really, again, it just almost seems like a totally random occurrence, kind of, but it helped.
It is weird that music though, my dad also played that kind of stuff, played bass in those bands and made records and toured. And I feel like, unbeknownst to probably a lot of fans, like it's hard as somebody who grew up around that type of music, Bon Iver records, for example, because I'm going like some of this stuff is like straight up Southern gospel, like the vocal runs and especially Big Red Machine stuff. It's like that's gospel music. Like that's all
100%. Yeah,
Five Blind Boys of Alabama, like through a vocoder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of what I'm saying is like the drumming little kernel, the kernel of that applied to the drumming part actually, I think has been like super important for me just all throughout my life, and it's like I'm drawing from that in all these different ways in, I don't know, ways I would have never expected. So,
yeah, which is so cool because you don't realize it, like you said, when you were doing that, how much that would kind of, guide into your future for, how you even play. I was just thinking about that, like how much you don't realize is involved with how you start playing, what you're listening to. You know what I mean? Like we talked about that a bunch on this podcast already, but just like the things I listen to kind of guided my drumming and even how I end up playing as an adult. But it's like the bands I played for have spoken into like from what I started playing like as a kid. And that's cool. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. And that's really fascinating because how you play now with like the dynamic that you have to play live and stuff might go back to you saying that. Like I had to play quiet but fast in a small, and it's like that type of drumming is such a unique thing that you can't really, you have to have it from an early age.
Yeah.
I really do think so I think that's cool to know that that's where you started.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's kind of an old aesthetic too, right? I think it was like, like the old days, I don't know. I think playing super hard is kind of a modern invention. You know what I mean? Probably with amplification and everything else. I think if you go back to like, I'm not a drum historian, but I just think when all music was acoustic for the most part, or maybe
there had to be wild dynamic,
yeah, the drums might need to be right there driving the band, but not super loud because there's meanwhile
you got to hear an acoustic guitar or something.
Yeah. There's Charlie Christian playing like jazz acoustic guitar. There's whoever it might be singing, like Billie Holiday singing An Inch from a Mic, and anyway, all that stuff. It's kind of like, it's weird to think kind of historically about it too, and how that
I do wonder, because you think like when you read a lot of the early rock and roll stuff, that stuff wasn't mic'd. Like they were dependent on the room. So I actually, like going back and looking at YouTube videos, I kind of wonder if the like playing loud thing didn't actually come from early rock and roll. I think it came from early big band stuff.
Big band. Yeah.
Oh, big band.
Yeah, big band.
When you watch those guys, like those brass sections sound like an army coming over the mountain.
Dude, and
a lot of those drummers were hitting so hard to compete with all the
horns, that's true.
I played in at my university. I played in the big band, and it was you're right, it's the loudest band I've ever been in, and because it's like it's what four saxes, 4 or 5 trombones, 4 or 5 trumpets, and those guys playing like double F or triple F. It's like it's freaking loud. And
find yourself playing harder in that situation.
Oh, for sure. And almost like that's what pushed. Yeah, I mean, it still maybe doesn't compare to like whatever, like an SVT or something, really. But I definitely remember feeling in school like, wow, I'm not cutting up. I'm not cutting through the band, really. So
wow.
That's a really good observation, Jordan, about that. I think that's...
Well, I just think dynamic of like we discussed, because I'm, again, how I play drums, like obviously there's dynamic to some extent, but I'm always fascinated by that because that's a tough one to learn as a drummer. You know what I mean? Like when to play quiet or when to...
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Sufjan show. I saw you in Orlando. What year was that, Jordan? Do you remember that?
Was that Carrie and Lowell tour?
Was that Orlando?
I was at that show too.
Yeah, Reed and I went, and I actually was checked to Jordan. He's like, oh, I hadn't met you yet, but he's like, James playing. But that, I just remember that show, the dynamics were just, obviously everything's mic'd and stuff, but I just remember thinking how you have to have that or you don't have it. I mean, obviously you can learn, everyone can always learn, but I think that especially with drums, because it's like how the velocity of how you hit and when, how
it's easy to learn it when you're younger. It's so much like breaking bad habits is so much harder. Like for me, I learned playing hard and hit the hell out of my drums.
For sure.
Yeah. I do wonder though, like, and obviously James, you would know the answer to this. Our friend Josh, he managed or was tour managing Feist for a while. Mm-hmm. And I went and saw her play. He got us in, and I was talking to him after, because it was such a very dynamic show, but very loud. And she had all these like contact mics and was doing all this kind of crazy stuff. And he was like, actually, she sings, everybody plays very quiet in that band. And he was like, it's hard. The contact mics, like, you know, if you're up on stage, you can't really move around because like you can hear the footsteps, like, because everything's like so gained up for the volume. Does Sufjan play, does he sing really quiet and that sort of thing? Or is it,
it's incredibly quiet. It's like, wow. It's that front of house job is not, it's not an easy job because it's like,
I bet.
Because you've got, especially maybe not so much on Carrie and Lowell, I think was a little easier because it was
electronic stuff.
It was more electronic and it was more acoustic based. There wasn't a ton of horns and stuff because I think when you get brass involved, it gets really tricky. But he just sings it at a whisper, you know, basically.
There's like so much gain too, like in the microphone, just like picks up everything, no matter what.
Yeah, and that I really wish I could have heard the front of house because I'm sure that there were moments where I was playing too loud. I avoided the drum cage every single tour, which is kind of crazy, but
yeah, that's crazy.
That would have been the first thing they would. That would be the first. That would be shots fired against me. The first one, you know.
Yeah.
And
have you ever had to use one
in every church I've ever played? Like, not the thing is actually even with it's so fun to think about, but yeah, even with my dad's group, we didn't use one. I think they were just like they knew I was young. Yeah, they knew I was young enough. They could like train me to just play quiet. You know, it wasn't you had the drummer with the whatever, like Z Customs.
Yeah, Z
Customs,
Few bells.
Yeah. This that was the very first podcast we ever did. We talked about that because it's like every church in America, it's Z Customs and hot rods, which is like the funniest.
Yeah. It's the clickiest sound you've ever heard. But weirdly hot. Okay, this is a good. Hot rods are kind of back in.
Someone was just talking about that with me. They're like, oh yeah, they're like super dynamic and cool, and I was like, are they? I was like,
I had a pair and they were plastic. The Vader ones are.
Oh yeah.
It's the bundle of plastic, you know.
Yeah. I'm saying this just the sort of stock ProMark hot rod, like hot rod classic.
The red handled hot rod.
Yeah, it's kind of and that was actually really funny because that was always, it's one of those things that was like, you know, reviled I think in the early 2000s. It was like, I remember me and Sufjan would specifically just make fun of those. That's one thing we really bonded on, was like making fun of hot rods. And because I think he played drums in a band when he was in college too. He's of course not unsurprisingly just multifacited.
I didn't know he played
insane.
Well, he played drums on his first few records too.
Really?
I was gonna ask you that. What have you played on his albums? Which ones?
When did you start? Yeah,
I started playing live with him during the Michigan era, but the first record I'm on is Illinois, and then everything after that, with the exception of the new one, I didn't work on. But
how did you all meet?
Really great story. There's a singer-songwriter named Dennison Whitmer that was.
I know Dennison Whitmer.
So Dennison is an old friend, and we met him because a band I was in the early 2000s called Esther Drang was on the same record label as Dennison. It was called Burnt Toast Final, and they were a Philly label, and Dennison's from Philly, or lived in Philly. He's from Lancaster to be exact. And all that to say, he was just obviously just a great guy, and we met playing shows together. He and I did, and I don't really know how that he knows. I don't know how he met Suf, but around the time that the Michigan record came out for Sufjan, he was getting like, there was just a lot of like, whatever, he was starting to take off, and he got offered shows on the West Coast, which he had never, up to that point, he'd never left, like New York or that area. And his band were just his friends, like literally people. It's a famous. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, but he would just teach his friends how to play a part on an instrument that they didn't know how to play.
Sick.
Yeah, and it was the aesthetic, and it was actually really cool. But I think that kind of timed out for him, and he was like, okay, I need to find people that actually play their instrument. And so he just asked Dennison, like, hey, I don't know any. He knew zero drummers, which is great. He lives in New York City, and he's like, I don't know anyone that plays drums. And Dennison was like, oh, my friend James. And at the time I lived in Oklahoma, and he said, my friend James is a drummer. He would probably do it. So I was at Best Buy in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I like opened up my Razr phone. Like, weird, it's a New York area code, like, and I was excited. I was like, oh, this, nowadays no one would even no one would even Like you throw your phone away if you saw that.
Yeah.
You know? And I just was like, hey, I'm at the I'm like browsing CDs at Best Buy, and I open it up, and he's like, "Hey, is this James?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my name is Sufjan Stevens." And I was like, "Okay." He was like,
okay. You're like,
I know.
Okay.
I was like, "Cool."
That's a weird name. You just said sleep.
Yeah, I was like,
what'd you say?
Yeah, I'm like, that seems, I don't know. Is that your real name? I don't know. No, he was.
You think it's some telemarketer?
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
I don't want any. I don't want.
He was like, I'm playing. Dennison gave me your number, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he was like, I'm doing these shows on the West Coast, 5 shows, and I need a drummer. And I was just like, I didn't even know what the music was, but I was like, yes, like, like he was like, I can pay you $50 a show. And I was like, yeah, dude, this is rad.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I'm so in. So he never met me, saw me play, nothing.
Whoa.
And I know, isn't that funny? And then we showed up.
Was there any rehearsal involved beforehand though, or did you?
No, luckily we met in San Diego for a couple days, and it was kind of like, it felt like one of those like Ocean's movie or something, where it's like all these different people walk in.
They're all like ripping musicians.
Yeah. Well, actually not really.
You're the only one.
But that,
you're like,
no, I don't want to say that.
No.
There was a series of, God, that's a whole other thing. I've gotten, I don't know. Luckily everyone's still friends with me, but it was, I was a little bit of a strict.
You were serious about your craft.
I was serious. Yeah,
you should, but that makes sense, and that shows.
And when you're playing in 5 or something, and people can't, it's bad if not everyone can count to 5. You know what I mean?
100%.
So that was tough to put together, but
especially 5. Yeah,
5's a tricky.
5 is tricky.
Seriously though, 5 is. I mean, that's
5
tricky.
is a tough one.
Yeah.
And I mean, myself included, like, you know, I've definitely been like, oh no, that was 6. That's not going to work out very well in the end.
That's not going to work out in the end.
That was a 6.
Just when it comes back around.
Yeah.
Damn it.
I got to wait 5 more times for this to work out. So we met in San Diego and rehearsed, and it was so fun. And then I just played with him ever since then.
That's so cool.
So
how many, and I don't know if this is I shouldn't ask this, how many people from that moved on that are still playing?
It was kind of a slow refinement process, you know what I mean? So it was like basically no one from that band, but but it was
tour somebody got swapped out.
Yeah, and not always for any reason other than just, you know, it became more of a commitment kind of, and people had a lot of the folks on the early tours had their own, they were artists of their own, had their own thing going on. So it was like, oh cool. It felt like everyone was just kind of jumping in and helping get that band going, and it just felt like it was just those, you know, those days when it's just fun, and it helped that the fans were so amped to just hear this music, and because he was just such a, I don't know, it was just real. This probably still stands. I don't think I've ever played a show with Sufjan that wasn't sold out.
Wow.
He has the thing for sure.
Well, when you showed up, you hadn't heard anything yet, right? It was like you hadn't heard music other than, I guess, maybe him sending you stuff so you could learn it. But
yeah, I was sort of familiar with Michigan because I knew people were already talking. I mean, again, I'm in Oklahoma. I didn't really have my finger on the pulse of like indie music, you know? So I remember checking it out and being like, oh, this is actually pretty cool, you know, like, but still I was a bit clueless. I just was like, this
when you got
cool.
when you got in the room with them, was it, did you like, you could feel it though? Like you could, you know what I mean? Like,
we were just friends right away too, which helps.
That's cool.
And it's like, you know, and then, but he's very serious, and I liked that it was this weird mixture of casual, we're joking around, everything's a joke, and then when it came time for the music, it was like, this is really hard, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, know your stuff.
After the fact, after you got to know him, was it weird to like circle back and then put it together that there's like a Danielson connection and like a Cornerstone and Esther Drang and that kind of that world, and you're like, oh shit, gosh. Like I'm also part of that.
Yeah, and I think he actually did the same thing with me, where he remembered seeing Esther Drang at Cornerstone and was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I think for a second he was kind of bummed. He was like, oh, you were in that band? You know? It was like, it was too far.
That's so much from that world. You're like, oh,
too many layers.
Yeah.
You got a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I know. I really actually, you guys, that's something that I guess, you know, some of us are, I don't know if everyone.
Ben's the only one that probably, and Bree didn't, you know, I mean, you kind of came from that world a little bit, but I'm saying, like, did you ever go to Cornerstone, Illinois?
Oh, I've never been to Cornerstone or anything.
I never went either.
Oh wow,
dodged it.
But you're aware of what
Yeah.
It is truly, not to just fully jump on Cornerstone, it's hard to explain if you haven't been of the heyday. Like, it is truly hard to be like, because we'll play festivals now and they're like, oh, there's a lot of people, whatever it was, 20,000 people, but explaining Cornerstone in the sheer size of it and the importance of it for an entire world, and also the damage that it potentially did to a lot, it encapsulated so much, but it's hard to explain.
None of us knew then. It's like you didn't know Sufjan was watching you play. We didn't know the years that I was going, and Nate was like, Oscar Isaac was there walking around, and you're sort of like,
Oscar Isaac talked about that. He's like, I think he went multiple times. Like, he was from that world, that actor. Yeah.
So it's weird to like that weird, the connections that. James, did you guys do a stage always, or did you ever do like the plywood thing in the woods? And...
we would go. We went and would always try to get on the impromptu stage, which was like, I don't know if you guys ever play that?
Yeah,
we did.
I've never played it, but I always would go watch.
That was like our big sort of like when I say try, I guess you don't always know if you're going to get on. I don't even remember how it worked, but we would just drive up there not knowing if we were going to play or not, even, which is insane.
Right.
And, I remember we did it a few times and it was so fun. It just felt like such an accomplishment, and then we graduated. I think the next couple years once we got had a real record out, we got on one of the stages. I'm not sure which one. And then
is Esther Drang still? Are those guys still going?
Yeah, Bryce is the singer and primary songwriter, and he still has a version of it going. I think it's just real casual, but they play shows around Tulsa, and they actually they did a tour I guess it would have been like 4 years ago now, but they toured with the Echo and the Bunnymen, actually.
Oh, that's crazy. Sick. Yeah.
Which is because, and the story goes that I think that guy, I can't remember his name, but the singer was watching some HBO show, and we had a song from one of our old records playing in the credits of this show, and he was like, checked it out and was like, this song rules, like, who's this band?
Crazy.
And they just hit it. I know, this is like way after. So I went to see the band that I was in. I went to like sit in the crowd, which was also a strange experience, but it was cool. They sounded really good.
That it's weird that you said, I'm in Oklahoma and I'm not like connected to indie stuff, but Oklahoma weirdly is like
big music, sort
of an oasis of indie. I mean, aside from obviously the Flaming Lips and that sort of thing, but there's I would say like Esther Drang, and I mean, there's a ton of bands from with Blackwatch there now, and it's kind of that like one specific type of indie world, Broncho and all that stuff is like there's a lot of really great bands from Norman and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and it just now more than ever. But when I think we lived in kind of a dark age there, where it was like there were no venues. I mean, because we would have to we would put on our own shows in like we would just come up with a place to do a show, which was really actually kind of fun. Like we played in an art gallery a few times, and there was like a weird random VFW hall, which I'm sure you guys have.
Played
done
multiple of those.
So it was kind of fun a little bit, but I do think now it's a different landscape. I think people are a lot more excited about Tulsa specifically and like Tulsa music history, and the young people there are like kind of having a renaissance of like whatever it is. It is a special place because it's definitely not the South, and it's definitely not Texas. It's definitely not
its own thing. Yeah,
it really is its own thing.
And you guys have such cool like old architectural stuff. Like Jordan, we walked around there and just were like, "Holy shit!" There's so much.
Oh yeah, we met up with you, James. And
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh,
and your brother.
That's right.
I remember. I sent you a picture and was like, "Dude, we're at the brewery in Tulsa," and your text just back was, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm right down the street."
Yeah, it was like I love that. I love that. That was so fun. That was
such a tour. That was such a tour thing. The only that kind of stuff happens on tour, where you're just like, "Hey, I'm here." You're like, "I'm here." Just
the day off.
Ben and I just hung out in New York City like last week because Ben flew up, and it's just like that's tour stuff, which is cool.
Yeah, I love Oklahoma. I still like my old band from Seattle made a record in Oklahoma and Norman, and it's weird when you're there for like a month and a half and it's like the middle of the summer. You would think like this is going to be hell because it's 100 degrees and sunny, and but when you're there, you're sort of like, everybody's really nice, the vibe is good, like it is really hot outside, so you don't feel bad about like staying in the air conditioned studio for the whole day, But even I remember, like, speaking of twisters that I could never get used to, is we were sitting outside having coffee one day and a siren's just going off.
Oh yeah,
and we're like looking at each other, and everyone's just walking normally down the street, and we're like, should we run like into a building? And we're like, oh, it's the test siren. I'm like, well, how do you know when it's real and when it's a test? They're like, well, it just happens every day every week at the same time. I'm like, I know, but what if during that time randomly there's a tornado?
They're like, just look up, dude. Is the weather look bad?
I know.
It looks fine outside.
It is a bit like, there's such a casualness to that whole energy down there too. Like, there's a twister.
Yeah.
Like, they're kind of like, it's kind of funny. And I try to describe that.
I was going to ask if you had any close calls before with a tornado.
Well, yeah, living in Tulsa weirdly is kind of protected. I don't know why, but just where it is in the landscape, there weren't really. I definitely got in the bathtub a few times with the mattress over, because we thought one was gonna.
Jeez,
but it wasn't like a Oklahoma City and Moore and Norman, or like, that's another story. Like,
damn,
that city Moore has been like leveled like multiple times, and everybody I tell that because my grandma lived in Moore, and I mean, I'm saying like leveled, like totally like from the movie, just kind of like destroyed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And everyone on the West Coast is always like, why do they keep building it in the same place? You're like, I'm like,
what's he gonna do?
Move it slightly to the left.
Maybe, but
I have like roads and electricity. We'll just find this field and build a new city.
That's sort of I would say that's the West Coast attitude with Oklahoma in general. They're just like, it's just what even is it? Like,
start over.
Start
over somewhere else.
The West Coast has forest fires. They rebuild.
It's the same thing in Florida with every
the hurricane
season. Everyone's like, how do you live with that? I'm like, yo, you have like a solid 2 weeks of heads up. If there's a hurricane coming, you have I mean, of course it can turn and all that stuff. You got to make the decision. But if you're even remotely stressed, just leave the state. And it's like, but tornadoes or like earthquakes and all that stuff, everyone's usually the West Coast is like, y'all are crazy. I'm like, dog, the whole world starts shaking with 0 heads up.
Yeah.
And y'all are like, yeah, it's fine. Just hold the plates.
Yeah. I'll take hurricanes any day and be able to prepare.
Ample time to prepare.
Yeah.
There was an earthquake the other day sitting here, and my craziest one I've ever felt, my monitors actually like wobbled back and forth. It was insane.
So where are you now, James?
I'm in Eagle Rock in Los Angeles.
Nice. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which is Eagle Rock's like on the east side of LA.
How long have you been there again?
We've been in LA for 12 years now. Yeah. And kind of moved around a little bit, but most of my time's been out here in Eagle Rock. And yeah, we lived in Seattle before that. So Oklahoma till I was 24 or so. Then I moved to Seattle for about a little less than 10 years, and then now at LA. So
I can't believe you've been in LA for longer.
I know, isn't that strange? I know it's weird when you cross that threshold. But yeah, I met Jordan in Seattle back in the, what was that, like 2005 era?
Yeah,
maybe?
something about early.
I was gonna ask you about living in LA and your setup too. Are you doing a lot of like remote stuff, or
that's what I was just about to ask?
Ooh, amazing!
You stole my question.
Yes,
Sorry.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I have a small room here, but behind my house that is kind of set up with drums and other stuff. And I think a lot of the stuff I've been doing is remote, which is kind of funny, right? Because it's sort of like, you're like, well, I'm right here, sort of supposedly where
the best
the
studio.
Mecca.
Yeah, all the action's happening. But it's just, I do go into studios, I would say maybe like once a month, there's a thing that happens in a proper studio, but more and more, I mean, and for me, it's like relationships I've had over the decades now. It's like people are pretty stoked to just send me stuff
and trust you to just do it. Yeah.
When you're in that room though, like how much, like you say, Aaron hits you about playing on a Taylor Swift thing or Ed Sheeran or whatever. How many times are you making tracks in your space, and then they're like, okay, now we need to go redo that at a studio, or are they just using what you're sending and that's it?
In that case, it's always been just this room, which is crazy.
That's so cool.
So you guys can see it. You're like, wait, what? But you also know that sometimes a small room is better than a big
room. I mean, the idea that you would go to, Sunset Sound and then they would basically just rebuild a room about that size for you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I know.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
True.
I've made the case though for certain projects. I remember kind of just sort of pitching it out there like, hey, don't you think this would be cool if we could like go to East West to like this is about as big a project as exists. So what if we went to like the and it's just never, I think that's what's cool about specifically working with Aaron is he just doesn't really care. He's just like, I just want it to sound cool.
Yeah.
And I want it to feel right. And he's not necessarily like worried about,
let's spend
yeah. And they even have the budget's fine. It's not really about the budget. It's just more like, it's honestly more about speed. I think like
sure.
Every single thing I've done for that, for those records has been like, how quickly can you do this? It's like,
well, also, your room and your gear and that sort of thing. If you were to go to a room, you're like, oh, I want to use that compressor, and like, oh, it's broken. And then you got to find it. So there's like, what you're capable of in that space. So I guess that is a little like you can do it probably double the speed because.
Well, and it's just me engineering. So it's just, I just know kind of what to do, and I will say that you have to, when you're in a small room and you kind of have to lean on the uniqueness of the sounds a little more than like I said, if we want it to sound like the Chili Peppers, like there's only one way to do that,
Right.
So it's like, so I don't really, and I've kind of actually for the last Gracie record, I actually went in, we have a pretty tall ceiling in the house and I set up while the family was away, I set up a small kit in the house, 3 mics, like a stereo room mic and 4, a kick and snare and then a stereo. And I borrowed a friend has this 1178 compressor, which is just like a stereo 1176. Anyway, just smashed the rooms. And I got like a really great kind of like flaming lipsy, for lack of a better just like description.
That's cool.
Drum sound. And I was excited, but it was, at the end of the day, it was like, oh, that's not quite right. It's too roomy or something. And
right.
So you just
go back. Go back to the dead.
Like, please go back to the cave. And you're like,
yeah.
Like, fine.
I know. So, but I think it's in the right circumstance. For sure, a bigger space would be cool, and it depends on, and I will say too, that on like a lot of the stuff I do with Aaron, I'm doing probably equal amounts keys and drum machines and percussion and guitar and all these other things. We have done a few drum things at Long Pond at his studio. So I've been out, I might go out for like a week, twice a year, or once a year and hit certain things there. 'Cause they have a big, nice space, and
that's awesome.
But I don't even think it's about the room. I think it's just it's about convenience. It's just like, let's just get this song done. What's going to work with the song, and that's what I love about working with him is he's not real hung up on gear or anything. It's just like, does this sound
cool
good to me right now?
That should be always the case, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When you're doing, say it's a Taylor thing and Aaron's producing it or whatever. Is he do they generally send you a bunch of stuff and he's like, play on a bunch of this stuff and then they pick and choose what they want? Or does he usually have very specific songs that he's thinking about you for specific things?
He's got kind of an idea. Yeah. He's got a pretty good arsenal of people that collaborate on those records, like it's JT Bates, it's Ben Lands. It's like, I couldn't even list everybody, just a whole grip of amazing folks. And so he kind of knows what each person sort of specializes in, so but yeah, and so to answer your question, I do end up kind of touching most songs, but specifically with drums, he will reach out. He'll be like, this is a JT song for sure. Like, I just know I want JT to play it. And then we'll be like, but it's cool again, it's been fun for me to just kind of get involved in other ways, other instruments and be able to play on stuff that JT's playing drums cool. on, or that Brian from the National is playing drums on, or this guy James from Big Thief, I think, plays on a lot of stuff too.
Sick. Nice. I love Big Thief.
So yeah, it's fun for Aaron too, because I think he's just really loves hearing people do what they do best, and he's not like
it's like true producer.
That's cool.
I think so. Yeah, and it's I kind of am jealous. Like, I want to be in the room with him more, but it's just, again, we're just going at such a crazy speed. Sometimes it's like the system I have here, I can just go and just play it, send back like 10 ideas in an hour. Right. And he's just like, yes, thanks.
Have you gotten like, I'm assuming speed wise, you've also probably gotten pretty quick at just spitting out
working
ideas
and
It depends on what it is though. A lot of times with instrument like guitar, for example, I'm not as skilled at. So one thing that's cool about being remote is I might spend 2 hours on a guitar part that if I was in the room with an artist, they would be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy sucks."
Yeah, what's happening? Right?
Like
I'm paying for this time, and
I'm like, "Are you?" They're just like, "Cut it!" Get him out of here. Like, but so I'm able to kind of like craft this thing that I might edit in a crazy way, or put 10 plugins on it and commit it and send it just as an idea, and they open it up and they go, "Oh, cool! That sounds good." They don't have to know how the sausage is made,
For sure. I think that's fascinating to me because some of the biggest albums ever, it's weird to me that there's a speed process to that, right? Like you mentioned that whatever's fastest, that's so strange to me. Even, maybe it is because I'm like old school and I came from the world of like, it takes you 3 months to make an album. But I would imagine that these big albums that they're like, really need to make sure that are what they are, you wouldn't want it to be like this fast. I always pictured it being like, let's get in and spend all this time getting these sounds. But hearing that was just kind of threw me off almost. I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize.
I feel like maybe
I know it's pop, but
right.
Still,
well, that's what I was going to say is it's, even if you are taking 3 months to make a record, we've talked about it on this podcast before. It's usually like the drums are like, okay, you got 3 days to bang out all the drums so we can move on to the important stuff. And I feel like with pop, it's probably a little bit more of that of like, just give us the base layer of the song so we can get in there and make it almost, you know what I mean?
I don't want to misrepresent. I think a lot of time is spent on the song production and as a whole.
Yeah, that's
writing. I got it. Yeah.
But when it comes to like, those of us that are on the periphery, like, what do you got? Then the ideas better be fast, because then it's like,
that makes sense.
Because it's a little bit more like it's just quicker judgments. Like that's not good, or this is
move
great.
On.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I kind of think that's also it's just it's different than a band. A band might spend at least in the old days it would be like whatever. Like there's a 10-song record and we're going to spend a year making this record
for sure.
That is, and it's just like however you want to
say in anger.
Well, one of the greats, one of the greatest records ever.
It's my favorite,
and snare sound too.
One of the greatest snare sounds. Thank you.
Go back and listen to it. You got to go back and listen to it. I'll stay.
No.
I actually think it's sick. At the time, everyone was
were making fun of it,
but now it's the most iconic. You cannot. Yeah. That's why I think it's genius. You hear it and you're like, he had something to it.
We're talking about it, however, 20 years later.
Exactly.
I was going to ask you how much are you doing on your end, committing, like you were saying, like sounds and doing experimental stuff? Like, are you just sending, like, is there any notes or is it?
Are they ever like, this would be great if it didn't have reverb? And you're like, I committed it. Like,
well, too bad. It's printed.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's been very little. It just depends on who you're working with. Every single producer is different in that sense, but most of the time it's just great. We love it, and I will make pretty bold decisions because like I said, I know it's just kind of getting pulled up and getting listened to and getting like,
you want it to not be raw and someone's like, I can't hear it. You want it to be able to be like,
I don't really believe in the whole like, well, I'm going to send this totally clean and like no character because you're going to do it later. I just know they're not going to do it later. They're going to hear it and go, this is boring.
But if it's the right stuff on it, the right sauce, because that's such an important thing.
I'll even, if I'm doing drums, a lot of times I'll print a stereo mix of the drums and include the individual files as well. Like, I try to, it's a little bit cumbersome, but I try to give the, and I'll always say like the individual mics are there if you don't like this processing, but here's how I hear the drums, and it's
cool.
You've known Aaron as a good example of a guy that you've known long enough where he's coming to you for your thing. So it would be weird if you didn't send him your thing,
Yeah. I think that that's kind of what I was getting at with everybody, that all of the collaborators on that stuff. It's like, everyone's got a voice that's really
specific,
unique and specific. Yeah. And I think it's a really cool system actually, and it's not as, like I said, I like being in the room with people, but, and that's about, there's been certain records that we've done more in the room together, but the lion's share of it's just been me by myself.
That sounds awesome.
Plus the alternative is that you're sleeping in a bunk on a bus for 12 weeks at a time.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So
no, yeah, that I definitely have experienced that, and that's not really, that wouldn't be my first pick, but
James,
I don't mind it either.
James, I was going to ask on that note, what is your typical day like? I mean, you
Just
have
here in the studio?
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure it fluctuates with projects coming in and out, but do you set a specific time aside, like 9 to 5, I'm going to be in this room, I'm going to hammer out all these projects, and then I'll emerge and be with my family? Like, what exactly do you do from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's really, I think it's kind of, the last couple years have been so just full of so many fun and exciting things that it's like there's always something to do, or there's always something to work on, and I guess I kind of, this isn't the best scheduling style, but I usually just wake up and I definitely have a morning. I try to work out, and I take my daughter to school or whatever, and then usually by 10 or before I'm cooking, and I just do whatever is the most important for that day. You know what I mean? Like whatever. I kind of like being under pressure, so I get excited when I get the text of like, hey, we're working on this song right now. Can you get something back in an hour? I'm just like, yes. It's like this is where I
deadlines are fun from that standpoint.
I love that. Yeah.
Is it pretty random? Is it a pretty random text, or do you know it's coming? It's
super random. Like it just might be. I've been, and it's funny. I don't even know, and it's kind of not. I feel like a lot of producers and a lot of composers they're just sitting at their desk and they're going, we need this right now, and I can kind of relate to that feeling of like, you don't want to book, you're not like going to book it for next week, or you might not even, you want to hear it because you're in the middle of a creative flow to a certain extent, so.
Yeah. That example you gave about having something turned around in an hour, and you talked about working with Aaron on Taylor Swift stuff. Is that an example? Is it that quick that he needs from you?
Usually, thankfully nowadays it's a little more chill, but like the early records where we were, I mean, even I remember that, I can't remember what song it was, but there was a song, gosh, I think it might have been, I don't know what song it was. It was on Folklore, and it was literally like, can you do this in 30 minutes, please? Like it was really? 30 minutes. And I was like, yes. Wow. And luckily it wasn't like a lot of things, but it was something where I was like, and I was using audio.
You're like, well, I'm at Whole Foods right now. You just drop your bag and walk out.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're like, move.
Yeah, I know.
You're like, I know. Never mind, everyone. I don't need the smoothie. I gotta.
No, I wouldn't. I would probably just get the smoothie from Erewhon. I would wait. No,
is it? Let me ask you: Is it good? Is have the Erewhon
which
smoothie?
One?
I don't know. I just always see this thing about how good it is. I don't know.
Well, yeah, this feels like a trick question. Is it a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question.
Okay,
actually, I'm genuinely curious.
Okay.
Like, that's funny. It does sound kind of like
a rep.
No, I love it. No, it depends on which one you get, but I kind of like, it's kind of like coffee where you get, this is a little bit of a divisive thing I'm about to say, but there is a period where you love going out for coffee. And then there's a point where you realize you make your favorite coffee at home, kind of,
100%.
So I've kind of met that milestone in my smoothie life where I'm like,
you make it better.
Actually, I buy really good protein powder. I've got everything on hand. Like I can kind of make a better one to me, but occasionally when I'm out and about and I want to just make it easy, then yeah, for sure. That's, but we could do a whole like
podcast
B-roll about Erewhon
smoothies.
Yeah.
Smoothies,
for sure.
coffee.
James, before, I mean, we don't want to waste your time. You have 30 minutes to You have 30 minutes to get this track done. You told me a story I've years ago about messing up on stage with Sufjan.
Oh my gosh.
And I keep that in mind because I mess up quite a bit, and I usually think about that because of the level that you play at, and I say, okay,
I didn't do
this.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy that.
So I was wondering if you would be so kind as to tell these guys what the scenario was, because
this is actually a really good exercise because I hadn't thought about this in a long time. So thanks for bringing me back to this moment.
Thanks a lot, Jordan.
No, it's actually
worked through his whole psyche of the situation.
I feel the same way actually in my own life, where I'm like, I've already made the worst mistake, so no, I am fearless on stage now. I'm like, I don't care. Like, there's nothing that could happen.
The silver lining, that's good. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So yeah, we were. It was the Wings era Suf tour. I don't know if you guys ever saw that.
Oh yeah,
yes. I guess it would have been after Illinois.
Yeah,
before Age of Odds. So maybe like 2000.
Those things look heavy.
Maybe.
Were those heavy?
The wings were not easy to play drums in BT dub. It was it was pretty annoying.
I'm sure
you had like wind. I had like wind resistance. You know, insane. But I had a monster kit for that tour, and we. One of the things I had was a gong.
Was that the giant CNC, the gold concert toms?
No, this was before that. This would have been. It wasn't even. I think it was my CNC kit, but it was an older one, like a brown one that I had. And it was just monster in the sense that I had like a lot of little gadgets everywhere.
Yeah.
The drums themselves, I think it was a 5-piece, but I had a second bass drum off to my right on like a big extension pedal, like a big concert bass drum.
Whoa.
Was really cool. And to pair with that, I had a gong. So I would, at these big moments, it was like, it was more of an orchestral thing where I would just hit a gong and an wide open concert bass drum, and it sounded great. And with a big heavy gong mallet, like, cause you have to have the right mallet for that. So it was really heavy, like maybe I'm sure you've seen them. They're like as big around as a baseball bat, kind of.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, huge.
Just heavy and kind of front heavy, just to get that weight. Anyway, so there's a song we were playing in New York City. It's funny, the song detail is a little bit foggy. I think it was. We'll fact check this later. I can't remember the song. Basically, a very long banjo and vocal verse. So he's up there, and it was something we did every night. So it was about halfway through the set. Every night I did kind of my mind would wander in that moment. I'd just be like, okay, this is...
What are we going to eat after?
You can't leave during the acoustic stuff because you're wearing giant wings.
Yeah.
There's nowhere, you can't walk off stage.
It's always awkward when you're like, what do you do with yourself? And
I'm not playing. I'm sitting there. It's like, maybe I hadn't had enough protein. I was vegan in those days, so I was like a little under proteined.
Yeah.
You know how it goes. So, but there was basically he did something that he never had done before, which he just stopped in the middle of a verse, just sort of. I don't know why he did it. It was a very dramatic.
He was feeling
it, but he stopped playing. But that kind of snapped me out of my my zone, and I was like, oh no, somehow but what was supposed to happen is when he was actually supposed to stop, there would be like 4 beats of rest, dead air, and then a giant, the whole band drops on this like triple forte, like bananas thing.
Like
just the hardest you can hit the gong, the hardest you can hit the bass drum, just, which was really scary. Every night was scary, right? Because you're coming out of dead air. So I was just out of it enough where he stops, and I'm just like, it was like a dog, like, huh? And then just kaboom. And I just like blasted the gong, and he just kind of, and then I realized
unreal.
He turned around and was like, what in the world? Like, he had a whole nother several lyrics to sing.
That's incredible.
And so I was just like, okay, check please. Like, I'm out of here.
Dude, that feeling must have, as soon as you,
it was insane. It was insane.
So did you hit the next one? Like, did you have to do it again?
Yes, that was the most shameful moment.
The whole crowd was like, I
mean, every single person in the crowd someone that's never played an instrument was like, that drummer just messed up. It's like, because a lot of mistakes to us are like, no one ever notices. So.
Did you guys ever discuss it, or was it like, hey, let's never speak of this moment?
He actually was mad at me for like a few days.
Wow.
It was really traumatizing for us both, I think, because was what can I do? I was like, okay, man, I don't, it definitely wasn't his fault, but that it was enough of a sort of like, why did you just decide to stop? I don't know. It was
the combo of the two.
I would never do that now, I think, but a little bit less experience.
Better to miss the right gong hit than to hit it on the wrong at the wrong time.
Hitting it at the wrong time is insanity. Like, it was like, because
it's just such a funny story, because it's not like you just came in the wrong part and then you kind of faded out, or you
crashed
the wrong thing. The fact that it was a gong and an auxiliary kick drum.
30. Let me put it in perspective. A 32-inch bass drum. So that just like, that's how big it was.
Oh my god!
How big was the gong?
It's like 30. Yeah, it's insane. It was not a good. It was like, And imagine also too, you were talking about dynamics of, I mean, he's singing super quiet.
So right.
The entire audience was like, probably like jumped, like what just happened?
Right.
You know?
Someone has a heart attack.
I've had those feelings where you stop playing, like the first couple of tours where you can't remember a song and it's like there's a double chorus or whatever, and you just let it ring out the end of the first chorus. The rest of the band is just like
still going,
ripping, and you're just sitting there like, do I come back in or like do I
just light a cigarette? I just light a cigarette. No problem.
Oh man. I do think no one's ever made a worse mistake on stage, actually, with drums, because it's like, at least like maybe if it were something else, the front of house could mute it quickly or something, but it's like,
not a gong.
It's wide open town hall, like it's really acoustic and
in New York City, so sick.
Right, when you go through that, you know how much worse could it get? So.
That's the blessing, and like Jordan said, I like telling people because it hopefully just puts everyone else at ease too. It's like, okay, that's
when Jordan messes up, he's like, well, at least I didn't pull a James.
It's so true.
I mean, you play with so much technology stuff sometimes, though. Like the margin for error on. I mean, I've seen you, James, when you're like, you've got all of your setup and Ableton or whatever, and then you have like Cat 6 cables running to the side stage where there's like more stuff. So there's just like,
it's a little overwhelming.
That stuff's like, if one thing goes wrong, it's almost impossible in the moment to know exactly where the problem is because it's chained to so many things, you know?
Yeah. I think that's like, it's like a weird, I enjoy the risk of that for some weird reason. I kind of put myself in those positions to be like, this could go either way. Like, and it's kind of exciting to be a little bit scared on stage in that
You're
sense.
You're still chasing the high from the dong hit.
I know.
You're like, I need something. It's always the journey.
Nothing else feels. I know.
You're like, I got to get back to that.
It's really true, and I think actually the culture of playing with Sufjan was a big part of it because we were always changing things in every single sound check. We would sound check. He would rehearse the band. He would change something about what somebody was doing.
Man.
And it would always
that gives me anxiety.
It was like, you guys are already stressed out and nervous. I'm going to now make you wear angel wings.
Oh, it's the whole thing.
It's just going to add like another layer of.
I think it's super cool and fascinating though that is how his brain works. He's just like, I'm going to make sure you're more stressed.
No, 100%. And we joked. I mean, it was very apparent and very, very aware. Like everyone knew what was happening, and we just had to laugh about it because it was otherwise it would just be you'd actually have anxiety. You know, it just would be and you kind of it was a little bit of like a little bit of a jockey thing where it was like I would be like, see, dude, like we nailed that. You know what I mean? Like, and it would. Yeah. And it was kind of fun. Yeah, that's just sort of the dynamic, which is probably you wouldn't expect it from that music, but it was sort of the band culture. It's really served me well that having that in those formative years of like whenever that was like 10, 15 years of getting used to playing at that level, I guess, you know, and everything else does seem kind of like a piece of cake, really. And kind of like the mistake story. It's like even just being so used to being uncomfortable on stage, just now it feels normal to me. Or I'm like, oh yeah, this is just how I feel. Yeah. And then nothing else is as scary, you know? So I think that is a huge gift of that.
When you're playing with, I don't know, the National or anybody else, how often I would assume that there's most bands, it's kind of like we've worked out what we're going to play, and it's either what exactly is on the record or some version of that where it's quote unquote jammed out, but it's all worked out. There's not a lot of like changing it on the day.
No, not at all. Well, that band has a different kind of funny thing where they're so under rehearsed, where it's just like it's kind of like anything could happen on stage in a also kind of in a fun way, but in a different way because they're a band and they've been playing together for so long. Great bands are like that, right? They don't really need to. They're like they get annoyed if they have to like play a song,
run through stuff.
You know, yeah. So it's like it's kind of fun. It was fun for different reasons, and because that the music's a little more like. Let's just say the lines are a little more blurry with that band where it's like things can go way off the rails and it actually sounds good.
Yeah.
Know?
Right.
I love that.
The Suf world was so different because it was just like, you're just hop. It's like it's like the floor is lava. You know what I mean? Like everything is the floor is lava.
That's such a good example. That's awesome.
James, you've done so much. Your resume is insane. And I mean, so there are a lot of names you've worked with, but are there any artists or projects that you would love to be a part of today?
Oh man,
if you had a name,
this is my pitch. I get to pitch.
Yeah, pitch to all of our thousands of
wow. That's a really good question. Somebody asked me that once, or they asked me a version of that question, which was like, who would you play with if you could play with anyone? And I was like, Bob Dylan, and it just came out, and I don't know why.
You'll get no agreement on that.
We're big fans around here.
I know. That's what I heard about. But I also, and is there really of the four? There's no love for Bob.
I have appreciation for the cultural impact
Gotcha.
of the Bob.
Of course.
But I just, if he put out music today, I don't personally see, there's nothing that draws me to it. I can't get behind it. I understand why he's important, but if you remove, again, the cultural impact, I just don't know how much he has to stand on.
All right, Reed, because you said that exact thing, you're never allowed to hold it against me that I don't like Radiohead, because that's exactly how I feel about Radiohead.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big fan of the
Shots
band,
fired.
the band, and that connection
same.
is like
obviously.
the Dylan band thing is the thing that I've
those
stories and that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I think, and I think for me, there's a deeper. I'm such a Jim Keltner fan, so there's a particular era of Dylan too that I'm kind of most drawn to, and it's like the 80s, and it's the era that no one else likes actually. And
I like the 80s Dylan.
Okay,
I don't know that era at all. I'll admit, I don't think I even know what that sounds like.
It got pretty weird, but like in a cool way. I mean,
just imagine this conversation being like someone being like, the Grateful Dead's amazing, and you guys being like, Grateful Dead sucks. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a little, Bob's sort of like, he's that level of like, it's definitely an acquired taste, if that makes sense,
Sure.
And so, and I never judge anyone that says I don't dig it, because it's just sort of like, it depends on what you've heard and what you're listening to, because it's not for everyone. But I think that even the new stuff I really like. I mean, well,
I will say I felt that way about, obviously everybody knows, you hear Casey Jones or whatever from the Grateful Dead when you're 7 years old at the mall or whatever, like everybody knows those songs, but I never really paid attention and I didn't really care. And then when it kind of got back into the zeitgeist with John Mayer doing stuff, I was like, I want to know what all this hubbub was about. And I started listening, and then I went really deep, and it clicked with me.
That's what I mean.
In my 30s. And with that movie coming out with Timothée Chalamet, I think Dylan's about to be in the zeitgeist again, because it's going to be everywhere. Well, it's going to be
I'm already noticing that. There's like someone just was like, I saw something someone said, it was like early 20s. They're like, yo, who's your favorite artist? And I was like, Bob Dylan. Like, I was like,
so
what?
In 6 months, he could be my favorite thing of all time, because now it's like you can't get away from it to some point. So then you start going, well, I'll check it out. And then it's like, oh, then it clicks.
I mean, that movie looks absolutely awful, but
it does look awful.
Yeah. And the thing I say about that is,
what if that's like, he's like, that's my friend. Like,
no, not at all.
I did the soundtrack for that.
No, not at all. No, I have no connection. The thing about it, see, everyone always focuses on like 60s Dylan. You know what I mean? Like,
because that was the revolutionary.
Maybe that's what I'm hung up on.
It's like, that's just like, I don't ever like, I don't need to hear Blowing in the Wind ever again in my whole life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a good song, I think, but it's not like, there's so many.
What's your favorite album? Like, what's your favorite? Like, what is, if you had to pick one?
You're trying to convince me to like Dylan, what would you recommend?
Oh wow,
that's a good question.
No, I would say check out Time Out of Mind.
Great. That's a great album.
Yeah, because it's modern enough, and it's got just such amazing musicianship, and his voice is like in its later stage where he just sounds scary.
Is that Linois? Did Linois produce that?
That's Linois. Yeah,
and didn't two drummers played on it? Was it Keltner or no?
It's Keltner and Brian Blade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian Blade.
So it's a drum record.
Yeah, it is.
Sure,
Yeah.
Oh hell yeah.
So forget, even if you're like, I don't really like the songs, I think you'll appreciate the drumming.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then if that sort of does anything for you, then you can kind of work your way back a little bit, because there's the 80s stuff, because that came out in 97 maybe or something like that.
Wow.
Something like that, yeah.
The 80s one that's if it was my actual favorite record, it's called Shot of Love. And I think it's like 1981. Do you know Shot of Love, Ben?
I don't. I'm going to listen to that later.
That's a Keltner one.
Is it a Keltner one?
Yeah. And it's, not every song right away you're going to be like, so I realize there's a certain amount of like blues dad that I'm doing when I say I like this stuff, know, because it's like, it is definitely like total blues dad kind of, but it's just, when the outfit's just right. And a certain thing can be like 1 degree off and be really lame, or be totally spot on and be like just perfect.
There's so much. That's kind of how I feel about it. Though there's so many things like that's a perfect.
I love Talking Heads, but I also can see just one or two odd choices, and that band would be a band that everyone would be like, this is so corny, but it was like,
just rode that line.
It was right on the line where it's like, even the new David Byrne stuff, like when he does the musical or whatever, where you're watching it and you're like, I'm so embarrassed to be watching this because it's a musical, but it's also not over the line. It's very close, but it's not over the line.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think you just kind of, and a lot of that, it's like context is everything. So I have a little bit behind why I'm so, but also specifically with Bob, to me, this taking it back to kind of like drummer brain, is his cadence and his delivery of the way that he sings words, to me, just feels like John Coltrane or something. It just feels very unique, and I can't even believe his phrasing sometimes, like what he's able to sort of squeeze into a measure, and how he chooses to put emphasis on certain things. So I think that's it. It sort of does something for my rhythmic brain too.
That's cool.
Listening to him sing.
Two of my sisters are absolutely obsessed. I think both of them say that's their favorite. So, and we always had this joking rub where I was like, oh God. But they say the same. I mean, they get mind blown. I think they even said that, like, as a drummer, they're like, I feel like you would love this. And I'm like, I don't know. It's like funny. Yeah. I need to deep dive into it. But yeah, both of them my whole life are like, that's their number.
And there's other good Keltner stuff from that era too, where you really get to hear him play, which that's kind of what I love when you find like when you can kind of hear his personality come through. God, there's some insane stuff too. There's some live versions of those Shot of Love. This is really nerdy, but there's like live versions of those Shot of Love songs where you're just like, Jim is just on another planet. It's like,
you know what? I'd be interested, like if you made like a playlist of like your top 10 Keltner songs.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, that's great.
I would like to hear.
If you do that, send it to me and I'll post it in the
that'd be cool. Because the episode before we're shitting all over Bob Dylan, so this would be a good one to kind of follow it up.
That's great.
Yeah.
I will. Dreamweaver is going to be on there, by the way. So just get ready.
Is it you that pointed out the fill that never resolves? It's just like in that song he just goes and he just goes right back into the rhythm. There's no
that's just his signature move. He'll just do those kind of like open ended, like the drums just fell off of the side of the road.
Yeah,
that song opens with this crazy single stroke roll crescendo that you're like, how did he even play that? And you never notice it because you probably don't ever listen to the very beginning of Dreamweaver. You know what I mean?
No,
the first 2 seconds of it, but you hear this.
I would say most people only hear that song when it's in a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
And that's just him saying Dreamweaver is always the same clip. Like no one's ever like actually sought it out.
I will take you up on the playlist.
You should. That'd be cool.
And I had one more quick question. If you have like right now, like a piece of gear that you're just like obsessed with, do you have something that's just like, or something you use a lot that you like just keep coming back to, and like you're like finding new things about it, or
I'll just, since we're talking about drums, I'll kind of keep it in the drum language. I have an 80s Gretsch kit that I've only had about a year that I'm obsessed with.
Nice.
It's like they call it it's the stop sign badge.
Yeah.
And it's specifically the drop G one, which I don't know what that. Anyway, they only made that badge for a couple years. It's blowing my mind as a recording kit. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome. What are
the pairing?
shells?
Yeah, what are the?
They're just the classic Gretsch, like Jasper shells.
Are they painted inside the gray?
They're gray, silver or whatever. And then mine are wrapped. I think even better are the ones that are lacquered finish. There's like a walnut and then a maple one. But yeah, they just sit so well in a track. For not to be nerdy, but and the pairing with that is I finally got. I've for years always wanted one of those pearl free floating brass piccolos, with the ones that they were in every school or something.
Yeah.
I just got one of those and it freaking rules. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So the kit's getting definitely pretty blues dad over here with those two.
Yeah.
You're like, next up, I'm getting a Throne with Flames.
Yeah. That might be where I draw the line, but maybe not. I don't know.
That's that 1 degree.
I know, exactly. No, it just that stuff. And that one, the piccolo, it's tuned pretty low. So you don't hear it and think, oh, he's playing, it's whatever. It's it's not necessarily one headlight sounding or whatever, but it's which is a great drum.
Before you go, if you had to say, like, is there a project where you're like, other than your solo stuff, like if you want to hear this embodies my drumming, like what artist or record or song should somebody go Spotify?
I think it's always that's a good question. I think it's always for me. That's all such different music, So it's like drumming wise, I think there's a Sufjan EP called All Delighted People that has, I think, some of my favorite drumming that I got to do with him on it.
That's a great EP.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And a lot of that was recorded live, so it's got this kind of, it's real naturalistic, and it's like that one feels like you can hear certain tunes you can kind of hear me on more than others,
Yeah.
And then there's a Taylor song that people do seem to comment on with me a lot when they find out that I play drums on it. It's called is it called So High School? I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I think it is that. No, I just my daughter is a big fan.
I'm sure you've heard it. That one was it's called that one has
the drums rip on that song.
Oh, thanks, dude. And you can at least, they're very upfront in the mix, which is not always what happens with stuff. So I heard that mix back and I was like, oh, sweet, okay, cool. This you can hear that, which is nice,
And so did you just get that track and then all the drum stuff was just your idea? Like you're like, this is what I want to play?
On that one, Aaron had a loop going, because he's like really into drum programming himself. So and it's never like, it's more like play around this, so
not play,
yeah, you know how, since we're all drummers, what you just naturally kind of hearing something makes you do something else,
Right, for sure.
So
that's cool.
He'll never give me like a blank canvas. I think there's always something to kind
of
hinge off of, Yeah. But
that's cool.
It just felt, it worked. I don't know why.
That's awesome. Very cool.
All right, man.
James, thanks for being on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here.
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys.